To unpack the escalating redistricting battle and its national implications, we're joined tonight by two voices from the front lines of American politics. From Washington, Ms. Ginger Chapman, the lawyer and Republican Party member, and from New York, Mr. Peter Roth, contributing editor at Newsweek. They help us trace the origins, stakes and uncertain future of what is becoming a full-blown map war. Thank you for joining us here on Think Tank. Ms. Chapman, from your perspective, what is motivating the GOP to push these changes, and is this just politics as usual or something more strategic?
Yes, well, first, Mr. Haney, thank you for having us today, and greetings to your viewers and your other guests. And redistricting, legislative battles, these are very common in American history. However, what is unusual is this sort of mid-decade push for redistricting. One thing historically, sitting presidents tend to lose seats in the House and Senate during midterm elections. So this is a push by Trump to preempt the potential loss of seats and the loss of the Republican majority. This redistricting is further made possible because in 2013, and then subsequently, the Supreme Court invalidated and loosened sections of our Voting Rights Act, which the intent of which was to keep voting districts from becoming essentially so that minority voters could have voting districts where they could win. Now, it is unusual that Texas is redistricting this close to the midterms. It's not uncommon for Democrats to flee and to avoid legislative votes. One of the things that's very unusual about this is that other states such as Illinois, California, possibly New York, are threatening to have their own redistricting to make up for the potential loss of Democrat seats that may result from Texas's redistricting. However, Illinois, California are examples of the most heavily gerrymandered states in the union. Indeed, Illinois has been gerrymandered so heavily in favor of Democrats that it is nearly impossible for a Republican to win in Illinois, likewise in California. So the threats from Governor Gavin Newsom, Governor Pritzker in Illinois to do their own redistricting, these are not valid threats. They've redistricted as much as they can to maximize Democratic seats. The real danger is if this spreads to other swing states, other states that are more volatile, then this will create messy legal battles going into the midterms, and this will make the midterms even more polarized.
Yes.
And
well, Mr. Roth, set the scene for us. From your point of view, why is redistricting suddenly back on America's front pages, and why Texas in particular? What is the urgency of the redistricting push currently underway in Texas?
Well, there are a couple of things, and Ms. Chapman's correct that with a 5-seat majority in the U.S. House of Representatives, altering the Texas map, as the Republicans have done, gives them 5 more seats. But it also reflects the tremendous in-migration that has occurred in the United States since the last census was completed in 2020. The Constitution requires that every 10 years we count how many people there are in the country, and we reapportion seats in the lower house of the legislature among the 50 states based on population data. There are 435 full-fledged members of the House of Representatives spread over those 50 states. No state can have fewer than 1 representative, so you have to parcel them all out. The population of Texas, like the population of Florida, has grown tremendously in the last few years since COVID. the population of California, the population of New York have dropped. And what they're talking about is moving the lines around to reflect, even though it's with the same number of seats. There are some other issues that we can get into about the remaps after 2030, but basically they're trying to adjust for population trends.
Ms. Chapman, do you feel Trump's engagement is energizing the Republican base, or is there maybe a risk of overreach?
Well, one of the things that is a hallmark of President Trump is overreach. He makes very bold moves. He reaches for the sun, the moon, the stars, and then sees what he can settle with here on Earth. Your other guest makes the excellent point that we do have 450 House seats. And our population is growing. Under our Constitution, there should be one representative for, I believe the exact number is somewhere around 400,000 to 600,000 residents. I'd have to look up the exact number, but we actually do need more members in the House of Representatives to accurately represent the growing population of the United States. That is another debate for another day. However, what we are seeing is these House battles and these Senate battles, particularly the House battles, because they occur every 2 years and they tend to be more intense, is that these battles are becoming more polarized. We have seen the response of the Democrats who fled Texas. They are defiant. They're saying, come and get us. Governor Abbott knows that the Texas Rangers and the Sergeant of Arms cannot cross state lines to bring the Democrats back. However, this is part of a larger pattern that we are seeing of Democrat obstruction rather than doing their jobs, showing up for work, voting with the other members in order to serve the citizens of their state. It should be noted, this is very risky for the Democrats. They are fleeing to avoid redistricting, but the other issue on the table is flood relief for the victims of the dramatic Texas floods that recently happened, in addition to more money for the Weather Service to be able to give better flood warnings. So this is an issue that's very important to the Texans, and the Democrats run the risk of alienating their own voters and ultimately losing in the court of public opinion. So there are a lot of other dynamics going on in addition to the redistricting, the ethnic and racial concerns, and also the power grab by President Trump in light of Democrats' past decades of redistricting in order to have a voting advantage in heavily Democratic states.
Yes, well, the Republicans do claim these changes reflect the legal and demographic realities, as you've mentioned. Is that 100% true, or is it mostly also about maximizing party advantage?
It's definitely about maximizing party advantage. Gerrymandering, redistricting is it's a long part of American political history. In fact, the very first court case about fleeing lawmakers was in 1880. It went to the Supreme Court. It was Kilburn versus Thompson. However, this had to do with the House of Representatives and Congress. Many of the congressional Washington, D.C. representatives fled. The case went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said the House of Representatives can bring back the members into attendance by any means necessary, including imprisonment. And this is what Governor Abbott got clarification for back in 2021 in Texas. So he can bring the Democrats back to the State House in handcuffs and have them vote, or they only have to be present. They do not even have to vote. So this does have the potential to spiral out of control, to get very messy. It is a power grab, but this has been going on throughout the past more than 100 years of American politics, gerrymandering, redistricting, getting the votes in your districts to ensure your win and squeeze out your political opponents. It may get more heated because of the elevated tensions and the heightened passions that we see around the presidency of Donald Trump. So this could be very, very messy going into the midterm elections.
Well, Ms. Chapman, critics and political observers argue that these walkouts are anti-democratic. Do you agree with that? And are such tactics justifying given the stakes?
They could be viewed as power grabs within our democracy. It's human nature to accrue power. This is actually a very big problem in American politics. It's something that we have many court cases and many fights over, and it does have the potential to spark racial and ethnic riots, which, as we've seen in America recently, we are a powder keg just waiting for a spark to set us off. So once again, it's a power grab. This could lead to a very messy midterm election as we're going into 2026. But this is a part of American politics, American primacy, and it will continue past Donald Trump's presidency. And the census, the growing populations, that is another thing that we do have to deal with. Once again, we do need to increase the number of representatives in the House, but these are long-term issues that hopefully we can solve our short-term powder keg issues and address our longer-term issues.
Well, talking about courtrooms now, do you believe that the courts will play a significant role here, or is this the Supreme Court's recent record on gerrymandering likely to shield the Texas GOP plan?
Well, actually, the courts will play a very big role in this, and whether they want to or not. And this is because of two elements of Governor Abbott's order, not just the arrest, but he also said that he would declare their seats vacant if they do not come back. And if the seats are vacant, then he can appoint a replacement for their seat. Now, this would be very politically fraught, and it would involve the courts because Abbott himself cannot declare their seats vacant. He has to go to a judge and have the judge declare the seat vacant, and a prosecutor would have to represent the state. It is very unlikely that a judge would want to decide to overturn the results of an election and remove an elected official. So this is something Governor Abbott has threatened. It is not clear that he can make good on his threat to declare their seats vacant. So there are other aspects that will go to the court. As far as he also said that they are levying massive fines, $500 a day, up to $8,500 per person. These fines will be upheld by the court. Interestingly, Governor Abbott said if donors and political groups pay the fines for the fleeing lawmakers, he will charge them with bribery. Now, this is an interesting question because the judges do tend to rule in favor of wanting lawmakers to not accept bribes. They do come down heavily on accusations of bribery. So if he charges them with bribery for their donors paying their fines, the courts could find they are guilty of accepting money in exchange for benefits, in exchange for not voting. So that is one legal issue. And the other legal issue, which is unlikely to succeed, is if Governor Abbott tries to declare their seats vacant and replace them. So there are many issues that would go to the court. This would be a field day for lawyers. Once again, the courts would be involved and it would get very messy, but it would definitely be another interesting chapter in American political and jurisprudence history.
Yes, definitely. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are joined by Mr. Roth. We got the connection back. Mr. Roth, is this redistricting effort purely political strategy, or are there any legal or demographic rationales behind the changes?
Well, the demographic rationales were what I mentioned before technology intervened and took me out of the program briefly. There has been a tremendous amount of in-migration. Look, there are a lot of issues that have to be settled about how congressional districts are allotted. There are laws and court decisions regarding the consideration of race and how much one can consider race when drawing lines, because one must consider race when drawing lines, but the law gives no precise direction. Another issue is that there is a growing body of opinion that people who are in the United States whose immigration status is unclear, they're not here as citizens or even as green card holders, are nonetheless counted in the census. And should those people who cannot vote, who are illegally voting if they are, should they be counted for purposes of allotting seats among the states? Mm-hmm. That would shift, if the courts were to find, in fact, they shouldn't, that would shift a number of seats, probably 5 or 6, from places like Illinois, California, New York, New Jersey, Democrat strongholds, to states like Florida, Texas, Utah, perhaps even Idaho, which is growing rapidly. So these are issues around the larger issue of reapportionment. In the immediate term, though, this is a gambit by the Republicans to increase their majorities in response to gerrymandered maps in places like Illinois, where there are only 3 Republicans, and California, where there are only 9. Now, Illinois and California are 2 of the largest by population states in the United States. And the partisan deviation is unacceptable, according to Democrats, when applied to other states with other standards. For example, in Wisconsin, where they claimed that the Wisconsin state legislature was gerrymandered in favor of the Republicans because the difference between the percentage of seats held by the Democrats and the percentage of votes Democrats win in statewide elections, there was such a large variance between the 2 numbers. So the Democrats are trying to have it both ways, yes, which is the real gerrymander. They want to draw maps in their favor wherever they possibly can to deny Republicans the advantage. They did this in the 80s, which probably prevented the Republicans from taking over the state house, the U.S. House of Representatives sometime in the 1980s rather than in 1994.
Yes. Well, Ms. Chapman, how are other Republican-led states looking upon Texas, viewing this? Could we see a wave of similar mid-decade redistricting efforts elsewhere?
Yes, we will. And also, your other guest raises a very important point as far as the in-migration growth of states with large illegal immigrant populations, whether or not to count them in the census. That is a battle, that is a growing battle. Democrats wanted to count them previously. However, as we've seen, Republican states are starting to attract many more people, both here legally and native-born Americans, because of their growing economies. So this is an issue that's going to come to a head very soon, whether or not to count illegal immigrants in our census and reward those states with large illegal populations with more numbers of seats in the House. As far as your question, what will Republican states do in response to Texas? It appears that other Republican states do now want to, as your other guest pointed out, reverse decades going back to the 80s of gerrymandering in Democrat led states. However, other Republicans will use the example of Texas to take the opportunity to see if they can redistrict in their states as well. Redistricting is a very popular activity for politicians to try to increase their strength and their power base and their voting blocks. And this mid-census redistricting by Texas is going to inspire other states, both Republican and Democrat, to redistrict themselves. However, as we've seen, Donald Trump will be behind the Republican states, cheerleading them on, especially to solidify the Republican majority in Congress. So this once again, this is throwing yet another element of chaos into already messy American political situation, especially heading into the midterms. However, these are ongoing battles, and these are battles that we continually need to have because our populations are continuously changing and shifting, and indeed accurate representation in the House does rely on accurate districting. So this is not over. Many other states will jump in. Democrat states for revenge, Republican states for opportunistic advantage. It's going to get messy, but this is the American political way, and it does have to happen in order to, we need to fight over our districts to make sure they're accurate and truly reflect the will of the voters that live there.
Well, Mr. Ruff, as Ms. Chapman mentioned, Trump allies have described this as correcting the imbalance. What's your take on that argument?
Well, I do think that there's an imbalance, but I think that both parties are playing politics here. On the one hand, they decry the effort to redraw the lines in Texas, and yet they offer to ignore state law in California to redraw the lines to reduce the number of Republicans in the California delegation from 9 to perhaps 5. And the law in California is clear that the lines must be drawn not by the legislature, not by the governor, but by an independent commission. And that's a law that was approved by the governor. Now, I think they drew a bad map, but a map that is not representative of California, but they drew it and they were committed to it for a decade. They're now threatening to redo that in retaliation. The governor of Illinois, J.B. Pritzker, who also wants to be president, is threatening to convene the legislature to draw a map to wipe out the 3 Republicans from Illinois. I think that idea that a state the size of Illinois has no Republicans in the House of Representatives is outrageous. Massachusetts is routinely drawn with 0 Republicans. There are 9 members of Congress from Massachusetts. Republicans win the gubernatorial race, so there are Republicans in the state, but they get 0 as far as membership in the House of Representatives goes. So it's not correct to say that mapping is a situation in which one party unfairly gains an advantage over the other. Both parties use the ability to draw lines to perpetuate their political majorities. That's part of the benefit of being in the majority party in the United States.
Ms. Ginger Chapman, the lawyer and Republican Party member, and Mr. Peter Ruff, the contributing editor at Newsweek. Thank you very much for joining us here in think tank. The battle lines are no longer just on ballots, but on maps, as my distinguished guests have mentioned. As each state redraws, the shape of democracy itself is at stake. That's all the time we have for this edition of Think Tank. I'm Henny Seif. Thank you for joining us.